Welcome, Parish and community. I am Brendan Underwood, and with me today, I have the honor to talk to the rockstar volunteer that is Bejan Mahmud. Want to introduce yourself, Bejan?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Brendan, for having me here. As Brendan said, my name is Bejan. I've been volunteering with the outreach services for actually almost exactly 2 years. I think I started around June of 2020. So sort of a bit of my anniversary too. Um, yeah, served in a couple of different roles, and really excited to chat with you about my experience.
Yeah. And to start it off, like, where do you, are you local to St. Louis, or where do you come from? Where's your home?
Yeah, I'm not a St. Louis native, although I do love St. Louis quite a bit. I moved to St. Louis 3 years ago for my studies. I'm originally from a country called Tajikistan in Central Asia. I moved to Omaha, Nebraska back in 2012 to do my, for college,
Yeah.
did my bachelor's and master's, and then eventually relocated to St. Louis.
So before all your traveling or worldwide and stuff like that, especially with your education in Omaha and stuff like that, what other service opportunities have you had the chance to do before coming to our little college church?
Yeah, so thinking back, I don't think I was really involved in any service opportunities for the sake of service itself. I can think of a couple different things I did, be volunteer at the emergency room at the hospital, local hospital in Omaha, or serve as part of this group that we would go out and have after school science programming for local middle and high schools in Omaha as well. But thinking back, those were primarily motivated by an attempt to boost up the CV for later on professional opportunities. So, if I'm being fully honest and fully open, sir, the current outreach programming that I've been involved in is perhaps one of the first instances of my doing something like that just for the sake of the service itself and not for the sake of gaining any, personal advantage out of it.
Yeah, and totally, it makes sense to, like, we are trying to get into good colleges, always trying to get good opportunities. So I definitely understand the need to like have that volunteer, and like it's really like very viewed like to the knowledge, like self-reflective, like why did you do those in the past? I'm not saying that your work in those previous roles weren't very important, especially in the emergency room at that. But like you recognizing your own reflection on stuff like that is really like very important. So how did you first get in contact with the college church to start doing service?
Yeah, so it was super random. It was a super late night, early in the pandemic actually. So right around May, late May of 2020, my sleep schedule was all over the place. So very late at night, I was just doom scrolling through Twitter. So an ad from SLU's Twitter account about the outreach program needing for more volunteers looked really enticing and sort of looked like an opportunity that aligned with my personal goals. So I just emailed the email address that was provided there, and Tess was on the coordinator at the time was on the receiving end, and got set up and started volunteering shortly thereafter.
So that the social media posts do work, people. Social media
Sometimes,
posts do
yeah,
work.
exactly. And it was just so random, and it was such a lucky occurrence too, because have I not seen it at the time, just the one post on Twitter, then I've never even known that there's such a program actually just 3 blocks down the road.
Yeah, like really close. Like there's so many things that go on in St. Louis that you don't have no idea what's going on unless you like specifically look for it or get lucky like you did.
Yeah, exactly.
A little more personal about you. Like, what are you studying at WashU?
Yeah, so I'm finishing my 3rd year in my PhD program. I'm in the microbiology program. My specific interests are in microbial genomics and bioengineering. So the lab I'm in, we study microbes not as individuals, but as members of community. So we study communities of microbes, and can find different communities everywhere, be it in a disease-related state. So one of the more prominent one is the community of bacteria that inhabit the human gut. So we have a lot of studies directed at that and see how different environmental stressors, one of the more prominent ones being antibiotics, disturb the gut community and how the gut community responds to that. But beyond that, anywhere that you can think of that microbes coexist, we're interested in it, and we go after it, and we look at the community interactions and how different environmental aspects or tools disrupt that community structure.
It's actually really cool that you're into that, because I actually had a lot of friends going through university that specifically studied that, especially. So I didn't really truly understand everything, but I understood like what was like the goal and like what is the general terms. Like it definitely sounds very complicated, and I love that. But now the real question is, what are connections, if at all, obviously, in your view, does your work in university, even be beyond just the lab, but like your experience in university connect to the work at College Church, the work you do at College Church specifically?
So, there's no immediate connection that I can think of, at very least from the purely professional perspective of what I do, just because, none of what I do here in the lab directly applies to our work in College Church. The one thing that I'm really grateful for and appreciative is the one thing that we tend to do in the academic setting is find ourselves in sort of a bubble where you're surrounded by, like-minded individuals who come from, very similar backgrounds and are of similar socioeconomic statuses. So it sort of blinds you to the broader community that you live in. And I think, just to tie it back to the outreach service that we do, I think there has been a growing realization within the academic setting that is indeed the case, that we do live in a bubble. We're not aware of the, greater communities within which we find ourselves. So, one of the greatest things that I've gotten out of the outreach is giving me an opportunity to expose myself to the greater community and see, what is the greater St. Louis about, and who are all the other people and communities that live here and our neighbors, and what their lives are like. So, again, just, directly get to your point, doesn't seem to be much of a direct relationship between what I do here and what we do in outreach, but it's more of like the complementary approaches of being exposed to different aspects of our community.
Yeah, and I totally see that. In the totally different direction with my studies with philosophy, we can get very insular and very like caught in these esoteric terms that only people who are in a very tight cohort really understands. And you think that it really distances yourself if you're not active and realizing that what you are studying is meant to be used, and especially with gut health. It's like you have all these terms, but it's really supposed to help other people and connect with the people that you're actually studying for. So I think that getting out in the community, whatever way, but our program as well, really tries to focus on seeing people as like that face-to-face, which I think is really key and very important. Now, we are a religious community, we are a College Church. Well, what is your personal faith journey? If you want to share that, and how do you see that in the work that you have at the outreach program?
Yeah, so my personal faith differs a little bit, or well, I should say in major ways from perhaps the traditional community that attends the College Church. I come from a traditionally Muslim background, and born and raised in a Muslim household, and that still still maintains some cultural ties to the Muslim ideology and philosophy. I would not say a lot of what I do these days is religiously motivated. Specifically the outreach service that I am a part of. I don't see a lot of pure spiritual faith-based motivation behind why I do what I do. It's more of finding myself within the community and the community-based reasons of providing outreach. But to completely negate the faith aspect of it would also, I don't think, be right. Again, I was brought up and raised in a deeply religious household. And so certain values that I was brought up with have obviously ingrained themselves and currently, if not directly, then certainly indirectly guide some of the beliefs that I have regarding how community structure should be like and how members of a community should behave.
Yeah, because I definitely understand like the team relationships with your rooted history, your rooted connection. Because me personally, I'm not my family comes from a very strong non-denominational Baptist tradition, and I don't practice right now, but I definitely see like the roots of certain moral, certain connections to certain community and caring for the next person, caring for the person next to you, even though they haven't done anything for you directly. It'd be, as you said, it would be ignorant on my part to say there's no connection, there's no undergirding that, especially since we all understand that we're raised by our parents, we're raised in the connections that we have, and if they're religious, that also affects it as well. So it would be ignorant not to say that's connected. So yeah, I agree with you. So going back to the program, what have you learned about this whole process? Will it be from the ID system, the birth certificates, learning about the people who are coming through the program? So it's a kind of wide question, but the whole process that you wish more people knew about.
Yeah, so it's sort of a two-way approach. You know, one is obvious, the most obvious part is the most successful guests we've had are the ones who are willing to, take that extra step and help themselves or help us help them. But the other thing that wasn't so obvious to me before I started volunteering and became more and more apparent is in how many ways the entire system to, just keeping it to the work that we do, the system of providing the essential documents to the people, in how in many ways it's not very optimal and it's not designed to directly address the needs of members of the community in a manner that doesn't put undue burden on them. I don't know what causes that. If I had to guess, is perhaps because people who build these systems are likely not aware of the struggles and challenges that many members of the community have to face. Going back to perhaps more representation in that manner or in that regard would be helpful. But yeah, that was probably the most illuminating part to me, that a lot of people around who are struggling, who are in need of these documents, who are doing their best to make their do their best to get the documents that they need, and yet there's so many hoops that they have to jump through that almost seem unnecessary and don't seem to serve any practical purpose.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with me coming in as well back in. I'm way newer to this than you are. 2 years for you, but I just came in February, and just me realizing there's this whole world of I've been in St. Louis my whole life, and this whole world of the struggles of people just trying to get IDs and birth certificates that I've had my whole life. I never had trouble walking into the DMV. Yeah, maybe taking like 2 or 3 hours to get to the documents and stuff like that. But that was never the issue for me, because I had a parent who could take off, who had knowledge of the process, who had the money to get it, and who could drive me there. All those things make it seem like it's it's super easy. Why does everybody get it? But once you get into the program, once you see the things, once you see the actual process, and that we have to walk somebody through it who doesn't have all the information, doesn't have all that, has that money, who doesn't have that to access, it becomes way more complicated than it should be for something that is basically becoming required now in Missouri and the United States at this point. Yeah, I agree. Now, do you have a situation that touched you personally when it came to, because you show a great understanding of the process and the reasons why you're doing it, especially since the pandemic. In those 2 years, has there been a situation that made you revitalize why you wanted to do this? Why it's important that you are here, just even collecting the information at the intake desk?
Yeah, so there are a couple that come to mind. One is more, I would say, self-centric. Um, the one that comes to mind is this a lady that we've been helping. She came to visit us, I think, 2 or 3 times, but then eventually during her last visit, she came up to me and gave me a hug and thanked me for the help that we provided, and ended the conversation by saying that she did manage to get the documents, birth certificate and ID, and that led to her getting a job and then eventually her apartment. So, ultimately the work that we do matters. If we see 10, 20 people, we might not be able to help all of them get on their feet and live the lives that they want to live. But even if we help one, and there's evidence that we're helping some people to go from point A to point B. So that's sort of the part that keeps you going, that ultimately you are helping somebody. You might not help many people, you might not even help the majority of people. I don't know the exact numbers, but you are ultimately helping somebody out there. And then the other part that is not necessarily directly, or a factor that directly motivates in doing this type of work, but a more personal thing for me, or the story that keeps coming up that has a more personal meaning for me, is when we have guests who are of age and they have had, by many different standards, very challenging lives, and lives full of struggles, and yet they're in their 70s or sometimes 80s, and yet they come in and still do that part to still get a hold of as much of their life that is remaining as possible. Meaning that they're still looking forward to something in the future. They're still looking forward to a better future, and that is a profound message of hope for me. That there's always something out there that you can do. There's it doesn't matter what has happened in the past. There's always the future days that you can look forward to and make the most of. So that's something that was unexpected. So I did not expect to get the message when I was starting the outreach, but just seeing the guests do their best and trying to make the most out of what is left for them has been truly inspiring.
Couldn't say it better myself. So we talked about your experience, whether it be from your academic point of view on it, your personal motivation during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, almost the very beginning, and a little bit about your roots when it comes to like your faith tradition that you were raised in, to like doing this work. So if before all that you were laying back on your bed, scrolling through your Twitter, and everything was looking kind of gloomy, especially with the start of the pandemic, what would you tell a new person like yourself? Not really the pandemic anymore, but what would you tell a new person like in that similar situation to expect coming into the program after all your experience these last 2 years?
Yeah, so I would just share my journey of, so again, as I mentioned, I did service before the outreach work that we're doing now, but it was for different reasons. But the one thing that came from that nonetheless was not just the boosting the CV part, but also the opportunity to see that there are many problems that exist in the environments that we live ourselves, in the societies or communities we find ourselves. And that obviously became a lot more apparent early on in the pandemic during the social justice protests. And so I think at this point it is it will not surprise anyone that there are certain challenges in these communities, in the communities that we find ourselves. And so I think one thing became clear, and more clear to me, is that one thing would be to just be an activist and go out there and demand change. And the other thing is, and not to negate that has a lot of value on its own, but the other thing is to try to make as much of a change on your own, as small it is. And so I start feeling more and more strongly about being a member of this community, and then feeling the source of ownership of the community, not just the good, but also the bad. And with that comes a feeling of responsibility that that we got to do as much as we can to amend some of the wrongs that have been made. So I encourage anyone to give it a shot, be it through outreach or be it through any other opportunity. Dedicate, a small chunk of time, but do it consistently, do it routinely, just to hopefully make some of the changes that we want to see in the future.
And I thank you for that. And thank you for the parish and community who've listened to our conversation, this important conversation, this great conversation with Bejan. And we look forward to any further conversations that people want to have. This is an open platform that we want to share people like Bejan who are doing great in our community and are sharing their stories in that. And thank you again, Bejan, for coming to talk to me.
Thanks, Brandon.